Hey everyone, thanks for being back here with us again. Today we're continuing our conversation with Dr. Martin Ball on the risks and rewards of working with 5 or 5-MeO DMT, the God molecule. Martin, one of the things as I was processing through our first conversation that I wanted to dig in a little deeper on was one of the side effects you mentioned was a lack of motivation. This is something that I have experienced. I wouldn't say it was a lack of motivation, maybe just a change of things that motivated me very drastically. But I've also had friends who have experienced things like this. Can you elaborate on what causes this and what your suggestion would be for people who are going through something like this after working with 5?
Sure. So I think one of the ways that we can look at this and kind of talk about this is that when we're really doing integrated work with 5-MeO DMT, that process should bring you closer and closer and more into alignment with your authentic self. And I know that sounds like kind of new agey and oh yeah, I'm going to find my authentic self and I'm going to live my best life. But the truth of the matter is that most of us are engaged in activities and also thought processes, internal thought processes that then motivates our behavior that is not actually in alignment with what we could describe as our natural desires or natural energies. And this is where we can use the word authenticity. So, in other words, like in modern Western capitalistic society, in general, there's a lot of motivation to be successful, make a lot of money, be influential, be powerful, be important, whatever that may be. And so this is something that a lot of people in their midlife kind of reach a crisis point where they ask themselves like, well, why am I doing all this? Like what am I doing? And it's also quite common for people, particularly in midlife, to reach a point not only where they're asking that, but they're realizing I've been engaged in all of this effort to achieve whatever this stuff is, and I've been super successful in that. Yet, why do I still feel empty or hollow or disconnected from myself or fundamentally unsatisfied with my life? So, in the case where somebody might be engaged in some kind of activities that they organize their life around that was not really authentic for them, this is what happens sometimes when you go through this 5-MeO experience. That as you go through this experience of energetic truth and feeling that and experiencing that within yourself, that former behaviors and actions and even goals and ambitions might suddenly just completely lose their interest for you. Or even worse, they might feel distinctly inauthentic and uncomfortable and even dare I say like disgusting. Like people like it's like I feel so horrible when I go to work. I'm maybe just putting that out there generically, but in those cases it can be very likely that someone in the immediate aftermath of a 5-meo experience might experience themselves as losing their motivation. And if they haven't yet found what perhaps is in authentic alignment for them, that they might not know where to direct themselves or their energy or their attention. And so it just kind of becomes this lull period of like, well, I definitely know that I don't want to do the thing that I've been doing. And that feels empty and shallow, but they haven't yet found what actually does fill them and give them that sense of, yeah, I'm really doing something that I love or that gives me a sense of meaning and that I can tell is in alignment with my authentic self. Now, on the flip side, I think this is particularly true for creative people. So, a lot of people who are creative, I count myself in this category. I like to use the term like compulsively creative. Like, I don't have a lot of choice in the matter. It's like, I like to create stuff, and it's a deep, deep passion within me. And for those of us who are creative, even if that's not our career, it's not what we're doing all the time, we usually still like carve out some time to do the things that we feel are creative and expressive because it feels good because a creative action for many people, it hits that authenticity streak within them where they feel like, yeah, I really enjoy what I'm doing. It gives me a sense of meaning, gives me a sense of purpose, gives me a deep sense of satisfaction. So sometimes if you take creative types and they go through this experience, they kind of opposite of this other category of people we were just talking about, they experience an overwhelming compulsion to keep creating or maybe to do more and really enlivens their passion. And also for people who maybe had some kind of creative outlet earlier in life and maybe they lost it and dropped it, a lot of people rediscover that going through these. So it's the same kind of dynamic where if someone has been deeply involved in something that is not really authentic for them, or even, like we were just discussing religion a little bit before we hit record here, um, that if somebody was deeply involved in some kind of activity that they feel no longer holds some sense of truth for them, they're going to go through this time period of having to restructure themselves. And that usually means completely finding a new social system, new set of associates and people that you want to hang out with and spend time with. So that can be very difficult because it's really deconstructive of somebody's life. And then again, on the other hand, if somebody has been doing something that they find, wow, this really is very authentic for me, that if they already have that app outlet established, they tend to just pour themselves into that. And many people find that it's actually their most creative period of their lives and having a direct outlet. So these are all part of the same phenomenon. So it kind of depends on where people at on that spectrum and what they have been engaged in and how it now either authentically speaks to them or just no longer speaks to them. And that's not new age. I mean, that's just a matter of what you really want versus what you really don't want, what you really believe, what you don't really believe, and then living according to that standard. And again, I would highlight that this I like to say that 5-MeO is kind of like the ultimate truth serum because it's the ultimate experience of truth. And then if we continue to live in some kind of modality that we now know is not really true, it actually becomes more uncomfortable than it was before, and usually acutely so. And even to the degree where people feel nauseous, they feel like they need to throw up, or they feel, they walk into work and then they just have an immediate anxiety or panic attack or something like that. So it really can be quite overwhelming because everything is accentuated by the 5-MeO process to the nth degree.
One of the things you mentioned was there's a period of lull where you might not know exactly what it is that you want to do. I experienced that exact thing. I actually quit my job after working
Mhm.
with five. So I would warn people like, hey, you might make some very drastic decisions just because there's been a huge energetic change inside of you. That being said, it was hard for me to like figure out, well, really, what is the direction that I want to go? I'm curious if you would say is working with the medicine additional times, is that the answer? Or is it something that you just have to like do inner work on? Like, do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, so that actually brings up quite a few different thoughts. And one of the first things that I want to share is not necessarily an answer to the question, but it's related. That I think it's also important to keep in mind, especially in contemporary Western societies, that there is this almost overwhelming push to this idea of optimization, especially in the alternative wellness, alternative healthcare circles. There's this idea of optimization, and I see things where people are like talking about, I want to optimize myself so I can sleep the least number of hours, so I can do the most amount of work every day. And then I'm going to take these nootropic drugs so that I can function at just top level. And it's honestly insane. And people are burning themselves out. And so sometimes what happens after a 5-MeO experience is that people lose. It's not because necessarily they're doing something inauthentic, but actually they were burning themselves out. And so the system says, dude, you just need to sleep for the next week. And in our neo-puritanical culture, that rubs up against our values of you should be working and be productive and you should be optimized all the time. Every single moment, you should be multitasking, you should be accomplishing everything. And that's our definition of living the best life. And this idea of, hey, take a break, take a rest, go on a retreat, go on a vacation. I mean, here in the United States, we have the least amount of vacation time in the modern industrial world. We like to work ourselves to death, and it's not healthy for us. And so sometimes the whole system just says, nope, you're not going to do it. and you need to take a break. And that can be startling for people who live in a society that are always on this idea of don't ever get off the treadmill and make every moment count. And if you're not doing that, you are not living your best life. So we're just inundated with these messages of basically working ourselves to death. So even that just can be a great gift of, you know what? I am just going to spend the next week like sitting on the couch, watching Netflix and having the occasional reactivation. That can actually be really healthy for people. Now, in terms of finding your passion, whatever that may be, in general, this is more of a 3D lived experience kind of thing. It is not really a matter of, well, just go back in and do more medicine and try and discover it there. The big danger there is that we always have to keep in mind that even 5-MeO can actually amplify and augment the ego in various states, and that it is highly possible for people to get trapped in ego projections and narratives and meaning making. So, for example, sometimes people take 5-MeO and they say, whoa, I now know that my life purpose is to heal everyone on the planet, and this is what I'm going to do. And like, if I get somebody like this in an integration call, I'm going to point out to them, this is just a story that your ego is making up for you. Now, if you want to go heal people, you're going to have to go do that work and go heal people and do that. But the idea that there is some destiny or purpose or some ultimate mission that we are supposed to discover and then do that, that is 100% a projection and creation of the ego. That's not reality. So anytime you think you've found like, oh, this is the thing I'm supposed to do, just know that's your ego making a statement there. And and this is not necessarily related to 5-MeO, but I do see it a lot, so I'm going to mention it, that there also is this widespread belief that if I find the thing I'm, quote, supposed to do and, quote, fulfill my purpose, then the universe will respond with abundance and success. And that's another 100% bullshit story that your ego is telling you. Just because you find the thing that you are passionate about and that gives you a sense of purpose and meaning doesn't mean you're going to get rich or be successful doing it. And in fact, it might even be a lot harder than whatever it was that you were doing before. And you might be way less successful, but you will have a deep inner sense of satisfaction about it, which we could say, oh, well, that's priceless. But that's another big belief in modern American culture in general and Western society in general that there's all these spiritual teachers out there and alternative health teachers out there just saying, oh, you can have the perfect health that you want and you can have the life that you want. You just need to visualize, you need to find your purpose, and then you will have so much abundance and be so successful. And in my opinion, that's all just ego bait, is all that that is. And the hard truth, this is something that comes up all the time because people are looking for what is my ultimate purpose? What am I supposed to do? And my answer to them is always, your job is just to be yourself. And it's your job to figure out, what does that mean? What does that look like for me? What do I actually like? What do I actually want? And then go about being that and doing that. But it doesn't mean that then you will suddenly be rewarded by God or the universe or society or anything like that. And maybe what you find is what you have to say authentically actually rubs other people the wrong way. And um, maybe they don't reward you. Maybe they try and cancel you. Maybe they try and exile you. Maybe they try and kill you. Who knows? Um, but that's the risk you take, that there are consequences for choosing something that we feel is authentic, and letting go of our attachment to the outcomes. And that's a huge difference. That, again, doing something authentic does not mean that you get to determine the outcome of that. And you don't get to choose what that is. And just to speak on something else that you mentioned, in the ideal world, we would say, hey, if you're thinking of doing 5-MeO DMT, it would be great if you've got enough money in savings that you could actually survive a transition period into finding something new for you. Um, and that hopefully you don't have a lot of responsibilities that you're fully committed to. Um, and even with that said, that if we focus on prioritizing, look, I can't be my authentic self and follow my passion if I'm not supporting myself. That should also let us know that that should be a priority as well. And sometimes that does mean working jobs that you don't necessarily want or don't feel are the most fulfilling. And, I'm happy to say that at this point in my life, um, I am able to support myself at a level that is comfortable and, put my kids through college and stuff like that by doing this work that we are experiencing right now, like being able to have conversations like this. And yeah, I'm making a living doing it. But when I first experienced 5-MeO DMT in 2008, um, at that period of my life, I was totally broke. I was literally down to my last $100. That's all that I had. I was on food stamps. I was working odd jobs. And I had to do that for a number of years just to get by and still only making like poverty level wages for many, many years. And that all came on the heels of me really coming into I'm only gonna focus on really what I feel is authentic for me at that point. But that also meant like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Rogue Community College and I'm gonna teach English to international students, which is not my interest in any way, shape, or form. But it's what I had to do to help pay the bills and to get by. So, just
Mm.
thought I'd share that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing some of this like very sage counsel. Maybe is not necessarily like strictly related to 5-MeO per se, but it's wisdom that maybe you've gained through working with this ultimate truth serum. But which of your books would you say gives counsel on these types of things? Things that, hey, I've after working with the medicine this long, here's like just general sage advice like, for living life type of a thing. Do you have one?
Yeah, I mean that's an element I would say of like most of my books. Um, but I don't think I have like any specific books that are just about like sage wisdom for living your life. I think the closest thing, let me go through my stack here. So this is the short one. This is God's Handbook for Operating Human Vehicles, a no nonsense, no strings attached approach to universal being. And this one, it's a more of a it's a handbook. It's not a book. But the idea in writing this one was that I wanted to kind of distill out what is the basic thing that I'm trying to communicate and not make any references to psychedelics or entheogens or anything like that so that it would be more accessible for people who maybe weren't interested but just wanted like, well, what do I need to know in order to lead a meaningful and fulfilling life? So I think that this would be the closest to that would be God's handbook. Um, but I've written several novels. This is also something that I like to explore through the lens of characters, right? And showing like their lives and things like that. And then also I've written two different memoirs. One is Being Infinite, and that's more on the non-dual psychedelic side of things. And then also in this more recent time period of my life, I've had a really debilitating health condition. And so that became my book, A Sleep Story. And 'cause I like the subtitle. I always like being a little bit witty and, ironic, so it's A Sleep Story, an unintentional exploration of the altered states of being awake. So I thought that that was funny. But it kinda goes through that, okay, I do, for example, if somebody asks, like, "Do you feel that you have liberated yourself into the true authentic nature of your being?" I would say, "Yeah, absolutely. That's me. I've been through it. I'm there. I found it." And then going back to the question, like, okay, so then is your life perfect? Like, this is the great example, like, no, it's not. Um, there's a lot of stuff that has happened that has been very hard and very difficult and that I do have to live with. So for me, I mean, somebody who's cynical would come back and say, ah, well, then obviously you're not liberated because everything would be perfect. And that's where I just go back to like, look, I just think that that's an ego generated illusion. I don't buy it. I just simply don't. So yeah, I do try and communicate these kinds of things, but I haven't written a book specifically on like Martin's advice for living life. Again, the closest would be God's Handbook. So kind of,
Well,
I was just going to say, just kind of imagining like, what if, um, you're young, so you probably don't know this. What was that? The greatest American hero. There was like a superhero show when I was a kid. It was on TV, and it was about how this guy was like given this super suit, and it came with a handbook of like how to use the super suit and how to be a superhero. But I think he lost the handbook. So I just kind of thought, well, what if being a human being came with a handbook? Like, what would be in it from this radical non-dual perspective, and what advice would you give in that handbook? So that became God's handbook.
It's funny, I stumbled upon that because we were having our conversations. There was a little bit of research that I was doing, and I stumbled upon that. So I put it on the audio. There's an audio version,
Yeah.
and I haven't listened to all of it, but I can say it's like it was so fun to just even get into the start of it because I was noticing what you did with the music or the sound effects and the story. So it's very different than the other books of yours that I had read, and I'm excited to listen to it. But it seems like a really fun listen as well for anyone who might prefer listening instead of reading. It's out there in audio.
Yeah. It doing audiobooks, I do find that that's a fun way for me to be creative. And again, I am this compulsively creative person, so I don't want to just read a book. I mean, that's kind of boring. So I always at least put some music into my audiobooks, which is just fun for me. But with God's handbook, I was kind of imagining it as like some late night TV infomercial that you just kind of stumble across. And so there's the voice is like, I'm trying to sell you on this really cool idea, you know? So
Yeah, it's so fun. I love it. Um, One of the things you were talking about is a lot of ego showing up, right? And in our first conversation, you mentioned kind of this packaging of ego and awareness that often happens, and how sometimes when the ego dissolves, there can be this kind of going unconscious. I don't know if that's the
yeah,
right word, but
yeah.
when working with five, is there a change that happens with the individual and their relationship between ego and awareness? And what does that change look like?
Well, this is something that honestly I think it needs a lot more attention and study, because the best I can tell you is kind of from an anecdotal perspective of, having spoken with lots of people and worked with lots of people and having facilitated 5-MeO myself and having had my own experiences. So, first thing that I will say is that I myself have never once ever experienced a lapse of memory in my 5-MeO experiences or any psychedelic experience. So when we're working with 5-MeO, we have two basic categories where somebody takes a hit, everything turns into a brilliant white light, and then it's not until 10 or or even 20 minutes later until the ego comes back and then person says, I have no memory and no idea what happened over the last 20 minutes. Another phenomenon that happens is people take a hit, all of reality goes dark and goes black. And then 15, 20 minutes later, their ego comes back and they say, well, everything went black. And then I have no idea what happened. So this is very, very common in experiences with 5-MeO DMT. In contrast, there is this thing that I like to call the through line of awareness. And the way that this works is that awareness and egoic perspective, it's important to understand that these are two different things. They are not the same thing. But for most people, they have been so fundamentally coupled together that when the ego goes away, the person is not able to maintain any kind of awareness. So, and this is common. This is not a critique of anyone. It's not to say that anybody's better or any worse than anyone else. So for me, starting from my very first 5-MeO experience, as my ego was dissolving, I, as this witnessing awareness, was able to observe that go away. And then I was able to observe and experience, "Oh, look at that. It looks like I'm God. I'm this infinite being." And then I was able to observe as kind of layer by layer, the ego came back online. And also at that time, I had never seen anybody else experience 5-MeO, hadn't really talked to anybody else about it. So I didn't know that other people might go through these periods of what are called whiteouts and blackouts that, we later developed this terminology for it. Now, these kinds of eh, decoupling of awareness from egoic perspective, and that there's this memory gap It's actually really common with people who are new to 5-MeO. Now, in my experience and opinion, if people, particularly if people learn how to maintain focus through this entire experience and either not react through the ego or not just check out when the ego checks out, that they can learn to maintain awareness all the way through and that then they don't have these memory gaps anymore. Now, just to highlight, because sometimes people hear this and like, that makes no sense to me. Like, what do you mean? So I like to give this example, and I think that this is a little bit more relatable for some people. That I know that I certainly have had the experience where I have been in bed and I've set an alarm for some time that I'm supposed to get up. And somehow, miraculously, 10 seconds before the alarm goes off, I wake up and I'm able to turn it off. Now, who did that? Now, if I was asleep, that wasn't, quote, Martin, right? But there is another level of awareness that says, hmm, it's 10 seconds before wake up time. I'm going to wake Martin up so he can turn the alarm off because I know he doesn't want to be bothered by it. Now, that's still me. That's another layer of me. But I think it serves as an example that there can be awareness that is not mediated by the ego that we are still aware of in some sense. And then another really interesting phenomenon with the 5-MeO experience is that many people who do go through these memory gaps of these whiteouts or blackouts, it's actually very common for sometimes even the entire experience to filter back into awareness at a later time as something triggers an experience or an energy that was somehow reminiscent from that state that that person was in. And I think that's another clear example that, see, awareness was there all along. Like, you wouldn't be able to remember it now if there wasn't awareness that was present during that event. What came and left was your ego, but awareness was there the whole time. And now awareness is bringing some of that material back into your egoic consciousness so that now you, quote, you're aware of it, but it was there all along. And it's a weird phenomenon. And again, I think that with more practice and potentially some training, people can learn how to move through this experience and retain full awareness. That I don't think just because somebody has a whiteout means that they're always going to have a whiteout. In other words,
Well, and that's one of the things I was wondering as you were talking, which is if you're able to work with your awareness while using five to get to a point of maintaining awareness through the experience, does that have any impact in your regular sober life as far as how, like, is that an indication in any way that there's been a maturation of like my identity being taken away from my ego, and that as I work with the medicine, it also produces fruit in that way, like just in my normal day to day life?
yeah. Well, I think that for many people, again, this is not criticism, it's not a judgment, but for many people, they go around most of their day, most of their lives in a largely unconscious state. And so they're just being driven by the ego, and there's ego patterns and reactions, and a whole cascade of things happen within the ego. And then this is why people find themselves in situations that are similar again and again and again and again, and they keep kicking themselves like, God, why do I keep ending back in this same place or in this same kind of relationship or this same kind of dynamic again and again and again? It's because these unconscious patterns are running them and they're not really aware of what they're doing. So even there, we're using the word aware. So as you learn to really identify, like, oh, that's my ego operating, I can see it now, I understand it. And now I actually have the flexibility where I can choose to either go along with what my ego is prompting or say, no, I'm going to choose something differently. So we actually do decouple our awareness from these unconscious egoic patterns. And so this is like an exercise in cultivating awareness. And even for people who just want to get started with something like that, like even just doing some basic mindfulness practices can be useful of just starting to pay attention. And even a lot of these patterns are embodied and expressed in different ways. And so it might even be demonstrated by people's body language. So sometimes if we can just point out, okay, notice this aspect of your body language. Like, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that. For example, somebody who's in the airport and they're just tapping their foot, tap, 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 and they're just sitting there, and they're shaking the whole bench that everybody's sitting on. Like they don't even know, like, I am totally impacting everybody else's experience because I'm just shaking my leg and they don't know. And sometimes if you point it out, like, hey, do you mind like not shaking your leg? Like, oh, sorry, I didn't know I was doing that. So there was energy expressing and being run. There's a whole dynamic taking place, but you weren't even aware of it. So sometimes as we become aware of, okay, I need to look for these little signs within myself. And sometimes it might be a way that we breathe or a little sound that we make or some kind of gesture or some, I like to call it leaking energy. So if people are physically doing something that they're not aware of, like picking at their fingernails or something like that, that once we start bringing attention to, okay, you're leaking energy here. You're expressing energy in a way that you're not fully conscious and aware of, and that it is um, indicative of some kind of inner dynamic that's taking place. Once we become aware of it, that's kind of the first step. And then we learn to catch it. And then we can start to uncover what's underneath that and then start to make more conscious choices from that. So I do think that this is a process of becoming more and more acutely conscious and aware, but not in a self inhibiting way. So that we have like the neurotic, oh, I'm so self conscious, right? I'm so hyper aware of everything that it shuts me down. So that's a neurotic approach to self awareness. And that's being too self conscious. So this is done in a more neutral, observational way of becoming aware of how these patterns are running and expressing, and then freely and consciously choosing to do something that actually feels more authentic or more grounded in whatever way. And so that we are able to more freely navigate through our lives without that internal critic and judge, but still with this awareness of this is authentic for me versus that's not authentic for me. And so then we just become more and more conscious. And the whole process of working with 5-MeO for many people, not everyone all the time, but for many people, is about bringing these unconscious layers and patterns of the ego to the surface so that they get revealed and then potentially worked out and worked through and even cathartically released and let go. But that doesn't then mean that those patterns won't try and reassert themselves later, because they almost always do. So that we have to be vigilant and aware of when we are getting caught in one of our own traps that we've made.
Well, what you were mentioning is, in my opinion, one of the biggest rewards of working with five. Obviously, the experience itself is unspeakably beautiful. I had the blackout experience twice. And I came out and I don't have memory, like you were mentioning earlier. I don't have much memory of anything except that it was extremely peaceful, full of love, and very profound. I've had friends who had no recollection to the degree that they don't even think they had an experience at all.
Yeah.
They think it was like, well, it's either so out of memory that like I had zero anything. Like I was just laying there to the best of my knowledge. I just laid there and maybe felt a little fuzzy for a second, but that was it. Um, why does that happen? And how common is that to have like absolutely no experience versus just like the lack of memory versus all the way into full awareness the whole time? Is there an arc there? And can you speak to like commonalities between progressing up to that level?
Yeah. I'll admit, like, if I had gone through a whiteout or a blackout and then just had this lingering sense like, wow, I think it was really amazing, but I'm not sure because I don't really remember, I probably would feel disappointed. I'd be like, oh, did I miss it? And that's what a lot of people express, like, oh, I feel like I missed it and I didn't get it. Like I've been cheated of this. Um, but here's what I like to say is that if you really want to make progress with 5-MeO, your only real ambition should be to discover the truth relentlessly and ruthlessly. And if you keep pursuing that and you keep watching for where am I bullshitting myself? Where am I lying to myself? Where am I just telling myself comfortable stories? Where am I avoiding things that are uncomfortable? And if you keep doing that, then in my opinion, you will make progress. And if you really keep at it, you'll get there. But if you're just saying, "Well, I just really wanna have the beautiful experience," that's not a commitment to truth. That's a commitment to a certain projection and attachment that you have. You've gotta be willing to go through whatever it presents to you, and then keep working on maintaining your awareness and focus, and not giving in when the ego freaks out or tries to distract or tries to indulge. Um, there so many aspects to the ego, and even things like, sometimes people might say, "Oh, this is just so much fun, I just wanna dance with it," and that can be really nice and really beautiful, but that's also kind of an indulgence. Like, "Oh, can you actually just sit with it and not dance?" Because as soon as like, oh, yeah, well, I'm doing it," that could be really pleasurable and really fun. So if you're saying, "Look, I really wanna come to the truth of my being, and I wanna go through whatever I need to go through in order to get there," that's what I'm committing to, not, "I wanna feel good. I wanna have a good time. I want it to be blissful. I want it to be beautiful, but I want the truth." And, there's this saying that the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And so there's probably gonna be some elements of that too, where it's like, I don't want this. I don't like this. I don't wanna have to go through this. I don't wanna confront that. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I know previously you were harping on some of the ways that facilitators go about serving the medicine. That's can be harmful or at least unethical in some ways. I think everyone would probably agree with you, or at least people listening to this would likely say, "Yeah, I would love to find a facilitator that abides by Martin's principles." But finding a facilitator that abides by Martin's principles might not be easy for everybody. I don't know how common they are. I'm very grateful you have books out there, and I hope that people who do facilitate would seriously consider taking your suggested approach. But when it comes to, okay, I have an option of taking the medicine in a way that might not be with a facilitator who serves in your suggested approach, what would your suggestion be? Just wait until you find the right facilitator versus, I don't know that I'll get another opportunity if I don't do it with this particular person type of a thing.
Yeah. So what I would definitely recommend is that at the very least, um, don't sign up for a session with 5MEO just because you heard like, oh, this facilitator is going to be in town and I'm going to put my name on their list so that I get an opportunity to have this experience. Um, then this is like assuming that in a context like this, you don't know anything about the facilitator, you haven't had a chance to have a conversation with them, and maybe you have a trusted friend that's like, oh yeah, this person's great. But different people have different opinions of what makes somebody great or not. And so just because your friend or family member says, oh yeah, I really like this person, I really trust this person, doesn't mean that you're going to. And you might find that their whole style really puts you off, or that something about their character or their personality just makes it difficult for you to interact with them. And these are all things that are potentially going to get in the way of you relaxing and trusting and opening up. And that's really the most fundamental key to working with 5MEO. And here I think it's important to keep in mind that the most determining factor in your 5MEO experience is you. It's not anybody else. It's not the person serving you. It's not the other people who are around you. It's you. It's a radical confrontation and exposure of you, of yourself, with yourself, by yourself. Now, a good facilitator goes a long way to helping you with that. But even someone might be objectively like a good facilitator, but there might be something about it. Like, let's just say you have a bad relationship with your dad, for example. And for something about this facilitator just reminds you too much of your dad and you just can't get over it. Now, on the one hand, maybe that's exactly what you need because then that will allow you to expose that part of yourself within that session, and maybe you can make resolution with that. But if it just gets in the way, then that's just not going to be the right person for you. And I think this is probably true of most of the psychedelic world. There are a lot of characters out there. And some 5-MeO facilitators are just they're quite flamboyant. They're quite the characters. And sometimes that just might like this person just rubs me the wrong way for some reason. That might just make it harder for you. And then there's be other characters that like, wow, I really like this person's character, but I don't know if I really trust the way that they're serving. So this is where in the best circumstance is you are going to have an opportunity to get to know that person a little bit before working with them. And that might just mean checking them out on social media. Um, Even better is hopefully you get an opportunity to have a conversation with them. And if you do get a chance to have a conversation with them, I highly recommend that people ask questions. And for me, a sure sign of like don't work with that person is if you've got questions, and if A, you don't like their answers, well then you probably don't work with them, or B, they're not able to answer your question, then that would be a good indication like, well, maybe don't work with that person. Um, because there are, we talked about this a little bit last time, I think. I don't know. I talked to so many people like all week long about 5-MeO that I lose track of like, what did I say in that last conversation? But there there's such a range that there are people out there serving 5-MeO that maybe they've only experienced it once or twice, and they're like, "I've gotta serve this to other people, like, this is my purpose," and then they go about serving, but they have no actual experience or training. They're super enthusiastic, they're super eager, but they're just super inexperienced. And then there's other people who have spent years studying and practicing and working maybe as an apprentice to someone before developing their own practice, and then also refining their practice and really developing strong safety protocols. So, in general, if someone says, "Oh, yeah, just come on over, I'll serve you," that's probably someone who doesn't have a very strong practice. And if somebody says, "Okay, well, let's do an introductory interview. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to find out about your background, and then you can find out about mine, and then we can see if we're a good fit for each other," that might be the more rational way to go. But people should basically use their common sense. And I don't recommend prioritizing, I didn't say that very well, prioritizing the experience over the context. That it Even though it's just you and your own experience with yourself, the context goes a long way to contributing to allowing you to feel that you have permission to be yourself, permission to have your experience, permission to go through whatever you need to go through is. And also when it comes to asking people questions, I do like to recommend, like, well, talk to the facilitator and ask them, is it possible to have a private session or is it all done in front of other people? What are the rules around that? What are your policies? Can I bring someone with me or not? Can I video record it or not? Do you give me the opportunity to take more than one hit? Or are you one of these facilitators that is like, here's your one hit. If you want another one, you got to come back another day, which is never something that I recommend for the reasons of you want to get all the way through the experience. It might take more than one hit. So any facilitator who has like a set time limit of like, no, you got 20 minutes and then we got on to the next person, I would say don't ever do that. Like, not recommended. Um, but there's just a lot of factors involved. And so you want to find somebody who's a good fit for you. And just because it was a good fit for somebody that you know doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be a good fit for you personally.
Yeah. For someone who is interested, and like you were saying, um, to facilitate 5-MeO themselves, maybe they've just had an amazing experience, they're very passionate about it. What would you like if there is there a Martin Ball facilitation course? I mean, what what would you recommend? Hey, before you even consider it, these are the basics. You really gotta go through these things like before you start serving something like this.
Yeah. So the first thing would be yes, go out and buy Entheogenic Liberation, because that's the most thorough book about 5-MeO available and also how to work with it. Then I'd also recommend, well, you should go get the 5-MeO DMT integration book of mine. because it's the only book on the subject that you could find in the world. So, at least start there and educate yourself. And I think that that's important, just from that level, because if I do try and be very thorough and comprehensive in my books, and just as we've been discussing here, talking about what are the positives, what are the negatives, what are the scary parts, what are the good parts, and really try and be comprehensive and cover all of these details. So with people who are just brand new to the experience, they often think that their experience is everybody's experience. Um, I put myself in that camp category. When I had my first 5-MeO experience, I just thought, what could ever be easier? Like, this is amazing. Just like give someone a hit of this stuff and suddenly they have full non-dual realization about the nature of reality. Like, this is so easy. Oh my God. I didn't realize that there's lots of ways people could fight with it and go through traumatic experiences and how it can be really difficult for people because it wasn't difficult for me. It was so damn easy for me. I mean, and I was so mistaken with this idea of, oh, this is the easiest psychedelic in the world. It's the most powerful and it's also the easiest. How cool is that? So you got to educate yourself and you got to go beyond people who just want to tell you that it's easy and amazing. And then ideally, you should be in some kind of situation where you get the opportunity to observe lots of people because that's what's going to inform you about, oh, there's many different ways that people react to this and there's many different ways that people demonstrate what's going on with them. And then in terms of classes, um, I do teach at the Mindscape Psychedelic Institute, which offers online classes, and we do have the 5-MeO DMT facilitation course. It's the trauma informed 5-MeO DMT facilitation course. It's originally created by Stephen Kirby, who's the director of Mindscape Institute, and he brought me on really early to help develop the overall curriculum for the course and teach the course. So I'm one of the teachers in the course, and then we he wrote the book that is now the textbook for the course, and I have edited it. And originally, I had contributed a bunch to it, but then as he kept writing more, that I started removing my own contributions so it could really be his book. And that book is now available out there, and that's the textbook now that we use in the class. And I always tell the students once we get in, in the very first class, I always tell them, I am not here to teach you the way that I facilitated 5-MeO DMT. So I always make a very clear distinction that I say, as a practitioner, I was a non dual energetic practitioner who used 5-MeO DMT as a tool to work with my clients. And I was never a quote 5-MeO DMT facilitator, meaning that I'm just here to provide you with this experience. And I would also highlight that, yes, primarily I used 5-MeO DMT in my non dual energetic therapy practice, but we could also use mushrooms, or we could use DMT, or we could use salvia. So it's the same format, different medicines. So in the class, what we're focused on is what are all the things you need to know and do to be operating from a place of being well educated, well informed, and operating with integrity and um, with care and compassion and concern for your clients. And then we cover, what are trauma responses? What are good intake procedures? How do you set up your space? How do you serve the medicine? How do you work with clients? How do you prepare them? How do you move them through? What do you do in terms of integration and aftercare? What do you do in terms of screening? What do you do in emergencies, all of that kind of stuff. And so that is like a 5 to 6 month long course that meets every week and then also has an in-person portion that students can opt in on and then get practice serving each other 5-MeO. Like, for example, the most recent class just finished like 2 weeks ago. And some of those students live in Iceland, and some of the other students are in Europe. So in January, they're flying me out to Iceland so that we can do like 5 days together, where I am not going to be serving people. I've made this really clear with the students because some of them are like, "Can you serve me? Can you work with me?" And it's like I don't need any practice with this, but I'm going to come and I'm going to supervise you, and you guys get to serve each other, and I'm going to give you feedback and give you instruction and things like that. And also, I did that previously. It was not this past summer, but the summer before that, we met in Iowa and did that. And It was great. And then also with the Mindscape Institute, then I also teach my 5-MeO DMT integration specialist training class, which is not at all focused on how to facilitate and serve, though it comes up because many of the students in the class are actively facilitating, but it's more focused on the question of what do we do in terms of providing people with aftercare and guidance, especially understanding that 5-MeO is a very unique entheogenic experience, has a lot of unique after effects, and has a lot of unique, let's just say it, crises that people go through afterwards, and they need someone who is educated and informed to kind of help them through that process. So that is a 9-week course about training people to what I describe as my approach is a non-dual energetic perspective. And that's what all my books are about. That's what all my lectures are about. That's what all my interviews are about. Um, and that I'm seeking to teach other students what this body of knowledge is. And it really is, it's a deep body of knowledge that comes directly out of my own experience and how to apply that in working with clients on the integration side. And so I bring a lot of this into the facilitation, but it's really with this idea of I just want to give you the basics for how to be a good facilitator who knows what they're doing and knows this material, but again, not to try and function the way I used to function when I was facilitating, because again, I was this non dual energetic practitioner. And I've also, I've written in my books that I had a couple people when I was actively working, I had a couple people come with this idea of, Martin, I want to learn how you do this so that I can do the same thing that you do. And those people pretty much said, like, I don't know how in the world you're doing this, so I'm not going to try and do it. So I felt that it wasn't really something I could teach other people because it was just it's too nuanced ultimately. And you really have to be willing. The only way that I was able to function the way that I did is that I went through this whole process myself. And it was a really radical, radical, radical process. And this is not to brag in any capacity. This is just my honest assessment that I have yet to meet anybody who's gone as far in their process as I did. And for me, that's what it takes in order to function in this capacity.
Even reading your books, I picked up that how intuitive uh, your process was. Right, the way you were interacting with your clients as you described in your books. I was like, I don't know if there's any way I'm going to find anybody who could do anything like this. Like this is, I mean, the way that you worked with your clients was fascinating.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I just share a really
sure.
brief little story with you? Okay.
Yeah.
So this was towards the end of the time that I was actively uh, doing this practice. So I wrapped this up in the end of the summer in 2016. And so this is one of my last clients. And this woman came from a background of the Santo Daime Church. And Santo Daime Church, they drink ayahuasca. And a big portion of their doctrine is about this idea that you can incorporate disembodied entities and ascended masters and spirits and stuff like that, and that they can possess your body and that then they act through you. So, anyway, this woman did a session with me. And at the end, she asked me, she's like, what being are you working with in order to do this? Like she she was just astounded. And I didn't respond to her. I just kind of looked at her like, what do you mean? And it was so cool. Like this look came over her face. She's like, oh my God, it's just you, isn't it? I was like, that is correct. She's like, whoa, I don't know how you do this. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you.
No, that's really. It was almost like you got to take life as it comes and be appreciative of what life has for you. But reading your books, I was like, I went through a period of like it was sad because I was like, I don't know that I'm gonna find anybody to do non-dual and energetic therapy like to Martin's degree.
Yeah, and,
But
I mean, it's a question that came up in my, integration call with a client earlier today of asking, "Where can I find somebody who works the way that you describe in your books?" And my answer is just no one, and actually, it came up earlier this week as well. I mean, so I get this all the time, um, and I did have a very unique approach to this, And it's just not something that I think other people have really been able to replicate. And I don't really see it as my job of like, it's like, look, I've written the books. And if you can find your way into doing this, sweet. But don't expect me to teach it to you because you really need to find your own way. And until then, what we want to do is what I want to do is help create and educate facilitators who at least know what they're doing and understand the depth and breadth of this work. Not that they're going to be working as a non dual energetic practitioner, but that they're going to be a good facilitator who's not, in my opinion, not too reliant on ceremony and prayer and ritual. Those are not elements that I personally resonate with. And I also think that they're unnecessary. And also, people who aren't just augmenting their own ego of like, oh, I'm this amazing shaman healer thing or whatever. And there's a lot of that out there in the psychedelic world. Um, and just people who are good and grounded and know what they're doing and are in service to others with this extremely potent and powerful molecule that just takes a lot of care and attention so that it's done in a good way.
Yeah. Well, and doing the work that you did with 5-MeO, uh, obviously a radical pursuit of truth that's clearly lined
Yeah.
out in your books,
Yeah.
your mentions of authenticity. So that's part of it. Somewhat, I don't know if I would say regular use of the 5-MeO for at least as a tool for a period of time. Um, but what can individuals expect when working with this medicine on a regular basis? And do you have any concerns about overuse?
Yes. But let's talk about if you're really doing the work, if you're really, really doing it, like seriously doing it, for one, it should really be changing. It should not remain consistent. It should not be the same experience every time. If it's the same experience every time, you're probably stuck somewhere. And it should be changing and moving. Now, there are two different trajectories. I think maybe we mentioned this last time, but one is that some people need to spend a lot of time unwinding and releasing and letting go before they finally hit that point of like, oh, this is amazing. And then for other people, they might start with, oh, this is amazing. And then it shifts into more unwinding and confronting these aspects of themselves and coming into truth and alignment with that. So those are two basic trajectories. And they have their own ups and downs. But then in general, if somebody is working with it over time, it's more likely that their earlier experiences are going to be more dramatic with a lot more releasing and unwinding and exploding and potentially purging or screaming or whatever. And that the more you work with it, if you really are releasing whatever's been suppressed and you're coming more into alignment with what is authentic for you should actually have less and less of that as you go along because you are more in alignment with yourself. And it should, to some degree, even though it still might be super intense and super mind blowing, it should actually be getting easier and more natural. And I would say, if you have had memory gaps, those should be getting fewer and fewer, and you should be coming more fully into awareness. And from the coaching and facilitator perspective, I would say that for many people, when they came to me early on, again, it would be very explosive. And then if they worked with me over a period of time, then it's like we're getting more into nuance and just fine tuning like little details that, okay, so you're not jumping around like a crazy person anymore, but you're still getting distracted. So let's bring you back into focus. And so it becomes more of a fine tuning process. And then um, another element that I would describe is that initially there's a lot of releasing, getting things out of the way, and there can be a lot of deconstruction and shedding of these layers of identity and of the ego and the construct of the ego. So it feels like people often describe that they're going out or they're expanding or they're moving beyond, and then, oh, this stuff is turning inside out and I'm releasing it. But then as you clean out the vehicle, as I like to describe it, which is the body, that then you're actually making it more possible for this energy now to then come through you. This goes back to kind of what we were talking about before, that like with people who have a creative or expressive outlet, that they tend to become more creative and expressive. That's what I mean, that now the energy wants to be directed. It's like, use me, let's do something with it. And so it's actually this paradoxical sense. So the spiritual quest has always been, how do I ascend? How do I transcend? How do I get out? How do I go beyond? How do I merge with the infinite, or, you know, reach the highest states of consciousness? And we often imagine it as like this ladder or as some kind of pyramid, and like, I'm moving to the top. But that's total bullshit. It's not real. That's just a story that the ego is telling, because the truth is, each and every one of us is already God right here, right now. We always have been. We always will be. There's nothing you can do to attain that, because it's what you already are. You've just obscured this fact from yourself. You're not aware of it. So as we remove the blinders, that we realize, oh, everything I've been experiencing my entire life has already been it. I have already been it, but I just didn't know and I didn't realize. So initially what can bring people to 5-MeO is this quest to, I want to transcend, I want to go beyond. And there's this idea of, I'm going to get out, I'm going to transcend and become something more. But the more you work with it, if you're being honest, you will find actually this medicine is not taking me, quote, out of my body or out of my experience. It's actually bringing me more and more and more into reality, because the whole thing is actually just a process of learning how to be here as we are, and to authentically be here, to really, really be here. And so it's the complete opposite of what the spiritual traditions tell us is, this is the path to enlightenment. It's like, no, it's right freaking here, right now. And so as we go through this fine tuning process, we find that actually we are more here. And this, and sometimes people, I've seen this a lot with, quote, spiritual types, where they say, oh, well, I'm so connected to the spirit realm that I'm half in the spirit realm already. And that I'm in the realm of visions and all of that. And they're not here. They're dissociating into fantasy land. And this is like the radical entry point into, no, the reality is actually right here. So it goes against the grain of a lot of people's expectations. But so again, over time, you should be becoming more conscious, not less. You should be becoming more grounded, not less. You should be becoming more fully embodied in yourself, not less. And you should be becoming more invested in the reality of your life, not less. And you're entering into it in a way that is conscious and is grounded and is authentic. And then it's especially meaningful and fulfilling and satisfying and fun and enjoyable. But it's this process of really coming into yourself in a way that is liberated and free, so that you are free to be yourself here in this reality. Not that I'm in tune with the angels and I'm going to give you the messages from the beyond. Like it's not that. It's not that. Now, overuse. The biggest problem that I see is when people get their own supply and they're not working with a facilitator. And in some cases, people get really attached to the experience and they end up doing it like all the time, every day. And they're actually using it as like an escape hatch from their lived experiences. Like, oh, things are tough here. Oh, take another hit off the pipe. Like, oh, I just need to take another hit off the pipe. And that I've never seen anybody do that and remain grounded and centered in their life, that they just start drifting off. And so that's my biggest concern about overuse, is people getting their own supply. And like, if you're doing full on full release doses, like, you don't need to do a whole lot of those. Like, you really don't. And there's usually not a lot of desire to do a whole lot of those. I mean, you might want to go back like once a month for a while and keep doing that. But a lot of people who are overusing it, uh, Ironically, they're actually doing a lot of low doses all the time. And so what they're actually doing is learning how to build up their ego within the experience and use that to often create dissociated, self-aggrandized narratives for themselves. So yeah, people can definitely do too much, but that's rarely the case of people going to facilitators, that they are doing too much. It's usually people who are just doing it on their own and doing it all the time and not really using it as a tool to come into truth, but they're using it as a tool to escape into fantasy, which is always possible with any psychedelic. It doesn't, not unique to 5-MeO.
After my 2 full release doses, it's just almost incomprehensible to me. I know people do it, but it was almost like it feels incomprehensible to me that people could just do this, like, all the time, you because it's such a powerful experience. One of the things you were kind of saying earlier was sometimes you have people who can surrender, and then later, they still might have, like, a traumatic experience as they continue to work through it, or is that, like, not does that not happen?
Keep in mind that we don't necessarily resolve everything from one experience or even several experiences, that there still might be unaddressed parts of our personal makeup that just haven't breached the surface yet because we weren't ready for it. It wasn't the right time. So, this can be very surprising for people. And this has definitely come up. Keep in mind that no matter how many positive, wonderful things and experiences we have, life always goes on. And that we are impacted by different things, and that might trigger a reaction or a response to something that was buried deep inside us. So, yeah, it's always possible that no one should ever assume, well, it's always been great. So, I assume this time is going to be great. I mean, yeah, maybe. Um, and also, this can be hard to grasp, but it is if we're being honest with it, it is a self-directed program. So in other words, deeper levels of yourself will bring you into awareness of these things within yourself when it's the proper time for you to address it. And that if we are in this ongoing pursuit of the ultimate truth of ourselves, then we're going to have to confront and experience all of this stuff sooner or later, but it might not be until later. You don't know until
Yeah.
you get there. And then it's about, do I face this honestly? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely can turn.
I only have 2 more questions for you, and I would hate to miss going through this whole conversation and miss physical any physical side effects or concerns beyond, like, the mental and all these other things that we've already discussed. Are there any physical health risks associated with 5-MeO-DMT or regular use of it?
Not really that we know of. As long as we're speaking of reasonable dosages. So, like if we get into like really high dose range levels, then yeah, there's the possibility that somebody might have a heart attack. Somebody might actually lose the ability to breathe, and that is physically dangerous. But in terms of after effects, um, keep in mind there have been no long-term studies of human use of 5-MeO-DMT. It's too new for that. So maybe 20 years from now, we'll see like, oh, well, if you do too much, like this is something that happens in later life, and like that's not good. Maybe we'll discover that. But at this point, we don't know of anything like that. Um, Overall, 5-MeO is also being looked at in medical studies right now, that it does seem to be very good for regrowing damaged neural networks. I mean, there's the possibility of using that for treating people with Alzheimer's and dementia. So it actually might have a lot of health benefits. It also seems to be a very powerful anti-inflammatory. So overall, it seems to be good for the system. And again, there are no known toxicological properties of that, that we know of. And I will also put out sort of the corollary that I think this is even more of an open question when it comes to working with toad secretions, because there's a lot of other stuff in toad secretions, and it's still indeterminate about how much of that other stuff are you getting when you're working with toad secretions. And Some of that stuff might be toxic. It might have long-term cumulative effects. We don't know. We just need to be honest. We do not have any kind of scientific studies on this. Um, Now, if somebody is, and we probably discussed this, that if somebody is mentally imbalanced, let's say somebody who has schizophrenia, probably 5-MeO is going to make them worse, just to be honest. It's not as, I doubt it's going to fix it. So somebody who has a lot of, like medical level mental issues going on that requires psychiatric care, there's a good chance that this is going to destabilize them even more. Or people who are going through deep manic depressive episodes that could potentially highlight that and amplify that. So it is something that we want to be very careful of. And this for this reason, some facilitators screen for any kind of mental health issue, and then they just outright refuse, like, nope, no, I'm not going to serve you. Um,
What if that was just a prior part of their life, but that it had resolved or had not been a current part of their life? Would you still suggest that that person avoid usage of 5-MeO?
um, Not completely. I would just want to caution them that this might trigger a relapse or a reoccurrence, and it might even be beneficial. It might help you resolve it at some kind of deep level. It might not, but again, it's just something that I think we honestly have to just say that, like, we don't really have a lot of information on this, and really what we have is just anecdotal. Fortunately, 5-MeO-DMT is now at the point where it is being studied by a lot of different research institutes and universities around the world. There's a number of clinical studies that are happening right now. So we're going to be getting a lot more information about this and possible long-term mental health, physical health impacts, outcomes, benefits, things like that, and actually have like quantitative and qualitative data to really back it up. But they're just in the running right now, and they're often with small groups of people. So, in terms of like really large numbers to get meaningful scientific data, we just need a lot more research. So, it's just important just to be honest. And overall, my impression of 5-MeO is that even with the dangers that we've discussed, I think it is quite safe overall. Yes, if you serve a lot of people, for anybody who's facilitating, there will be a small number who have a very difficult time and might deeply regret that they've had this experience. But I think that the benefits outweigh the potential costs overall. Now, that doesn't help someone who's having a really difficult time and wishes that they'd never done it. Like they're like, okay, so I'm the sacrifice. And I'm sorry for anybody who gets stuck in something like that. That really sucks. And I don't wish that on anyone. But the benefits are so overwhelmingly amazing that I personally I'm willing to take the risk for myself because I really do believe in the benefits. And this, as we talked about last time, it really comes down to, look, if you're fully informed about this, and you say, "Yeah, I understand maybe I had some mental disturbance in the past, but I really am looking for this now," and that you understand the potential risks, then I say you deserve a shot. And I think as a human being, I think we all deserve a shot with 5-MeO DMT because there's nothing more revealing about the human experience than it's all God. I didn't know that this is what it was, but this is what it is. And to be able to have that experience, I just consider it a fundamental human birthright. And it is an experience that I personally wish every person on the planet would have so that we could learn to actually live with each other from that knowledge and not just belief or wish or desire. And I do think that it could be fundamentally transformative for the overall human experience in the same way that it could be deeply transformative for the personal experience for the person who has that I think it'd be very transformative for the world as well. And that universal thread is we are all just God interacting with itself. So maybe we could actually act like it and get beyond our surface superficial egoic identities that puts us into these really kind of rabid tribes at this point. So I would like to see that promoted just for universal peace and happiness and well-being of human beings. I think it'd be awesome.
Well, as you mentioned the studies, I was thinking over the last week, I'm kind of envious of people who might be here 100 years from now. I mean, you never know, but with the studies that they'll have access to from 5 that we don't have, and hopefully increased access that, I think it can fundamentally change the world, if, people start accessing it and seeing this thing that you just discussed, which you kind of already answered my last question. Tell us the value this medicine has given to your life and what patterns that, you've seen it bring out in the lives of others, because we talked a lot about the risks, but I also don't wanna end on the fact that this isn't an overwhelmingly, incredibly beautiful, profound experience. You already kinda started us getting there to ending on a positive note, but is there anything else you'd say about the value this medicine has brought to your life that you'd want others to know?
Well, so on the radio the other day, a good old song came up from U2 from the Joshua Tree album. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. That I have sung in the tongue of angels. I have, held hands with the devil. I've laid hands on the healer, all that, right? And Bono singing, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. So he's still on this quest. I'm still looking for this thing. I don't know what it is, but I'm still out there looking for it. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. Like, yeah, I haven't found it yet. I'm still looking for it. And this is where, for me, for my very first 5-MeO experience was like, holy shit, I found it. Like I found it. I found truth. I found reality. I found God. I found myself. I found it. There's nothing left for me to look for, which then frees up all the energy into what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? How do I want to live my life in my own way, having found this fundamental truth where all of my existential questions just evaporated. My existential fears and anxieties and worries, they evaporated. My existential ambitions evaporated into, wow, it's this is it. Like, so how do I go about living in this state of this is it? And for anybody who's a seeker, and a lot of people are, I mean, that's one of the ironies of seekers. A lot of seekers don't actually want to find because then that ruins the seeking. And it's like, but that gave me something to do and gave me purpose. But I just saw it as like freeing and liberating. Um, and that's something that I would never trade for anything at all. Because if I hadn't found it then, I'd still be looking for it now. I'd just be like, is it here? Is it here? What is it? Where is it? Um, and it's brought a level of clarity into my life, which again, I just would not trade for anything at all. I am so grateful, so infinitely grateful to what my experiences with 5-MeO have brought into my life and the mode of being that it has opened up within me. And again, that doesn't mean like everything's been perfect since then, because it definitely hasn't. So far from perfect. Um, but I'm able to live with it in a way that is still meaningful and rich for me. And so this incredible gift that has entered into my life, I mean, that's why I would like sharing this with others because the best thing about things that you love is when you can share them and that other people can experience them too. And so that's what motivates a lot of people with 5-MeO. It's like this is the most profound, amazing thing that's ever happened to me. So I want to share it. And so that's what I've been trying to dedicate my life towards, as well as like, well, I want to live a really fulfilling life that like makes me happy and is filled with things that I love and enjoy. And that I'm making the most of myself as who I am. And then I also want to share this with others so that we can all receive this amazing gift and live our lives in a state of liberation and freedom. And that's what I think the potential of 5-MeO is why I think it's the most important molecule in the universe. And I'm so grateful that it exists. And I'm so grateful that it entered into my life and that it has shaped everything that has come from my life. And I almost feel like I've gotten to live two lives. There was my life before 5-MeO, and then there was my life that I've built afterwards. And I'm grateful for both of them. But I know without a doubt that I'm a much happier and more satisfied person in this version of my life than I was before. And all the things that I'm grateful from earlier in my life, um, I I don't want to go back to who I was. I much more appreciate the self that I am now than what I was. And so that's just something that I want for everyone, because I'm sure everybody has at least some little area of their life where like, oh, I'm not really being myself. And for some people, it's like, there's no area of my life that I'm really being myself or that really feel confident and alive and satisfied. So I just want everybody to have that.
So beautiful.
Mm.
Martin, thank you so much for your wisdom, for sharing your counsel, your experience, your history with this medicine, this powerful medicine. Thank you for sharing with us. Um, and I hope you still have some time to hang out with Jocelyn and your son downstairs
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Moxie.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate having another extended conversation with you just to talk about all of these things. It's been
Yeah.
great. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Martin. Have a good one.